Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Juan, and I'm here today to talk to you guys about a topic that really matters to me. It's a topic about national and cultural identity. And more specifically for today, what makes a Filipino Filipino? Yes, I know everyone down there. I know what you guys are thinking right now. Why do we have this Korean-looking guy speaking an American accent telling me what a Filipino should be like? Shouldn't we have like a brown skin, big eyes, wearing a basketball jersey to be the one, tell me what a Filipino should be like? In Filipino? Well, I hope at the end of my talk today, you will all understand why I'm here speaking to all of you guys about this topic. So, before getting to today's topic, I want to ask you right there, where are you from? Yep, you. Philippines. What about you back there? On the corner, I think that's a blue shirt. That guy, hi, kuya, ikaw oh. You, don't turn around, yeah, you. Where are you from? Sorry? Philippines, okay, someone back there, that corner, where are you from? See? Everyone says Philippines. These are all very interesting answers because every time someone asks me this question, where I am from, I kind of panic. I can never answer it right away because I would always think, what do they mean by where I am from? For example, if I was traveling abroad and I'm on a tour, someone would ask me where I'm from, I would say, do you mean where I live or do you mean what my ethnicity is? And sometimes I think all they really want to know is why do I speak English with an American accent? And I'm sure all of you guys here can actually relate to that when you guys travel abroad. Or sometimes, for example, when I meet a new friend in Manila, I'll have some questions like, okay, does he mean where I'm from in terms of living up north or living down south? Or do they mean where I grew up or where I was born? Because all these questions are always in my mind when someone asks me where I am from. So, why do I have all these questions? I don't want to bore you guys with all the details yet of my backstory on what happens and why I keep asking these questions. So, quick background about myself. I was born in the Philippines by Fujian Chinese parents, and I was raised in Hong Kong. I moved to Hong Kong when I was a month old. Well, when I say move, I don't really say I had a choice. My parents kind of just dragged me over to Hong Kong. So, yeah, I was raised in Hong Kong. And I moved back to the Philippines a couple years back. Don't want to say exactly how many years because I don't want to tell you guys how old I am, but yeah. Moved back to the Philippines, studied in UP, and yeah, lived here ever since. So to you guys, am I a Filipino? I don't really need you guys to answer that, but yes, legally speaking, I am a Filipino. This is the Constitution. This is our Constitution. So under Article 4, Section 1, those who are citizens of the Philippines of the time of adoption of this Constitution, and 2, those whose fathers or mothers are citizens of the Philippines, check, that's 2 checks for me, and yeah, those born before January 17, 1973 of the Filipino mothers who elect Philippine citizenship upon reaching the age of majority, and those who are naturalized in accordance with law. So when I was born, like I said earlier, my parents are actually born and raised in the Philippines, so they are actually already Filipino. So that actually makes me, if I'm not mistaken, that makes me a natural-born Filipino, right? Which means I can technically run for president too. Yes, Richard for president. Okay, but the real thing is, socially speaking, am I accepted as a Filipino? So yeah, like I said, I'm not here to really discuss with you guys the legality of it. I'm not saying, hey, I want to change the law, I want this, I want that. I'm just trying to talk to you guys about the social perception on how Filipinos should be, or I don't want to say should be, or just giving you a new idea on how you should be perceived. So this ultimately brings us to the topic of the day, socially speaking, what makes a Filipino Filipino? In order to be a Filipino, do you need to be born in the Philippines? Legally speaking, do you need to? Do you need to know how to speak Tagalog, or Bisaya, or Kapampangan? Do you need to have Filipino blood? But honestly, what is Filipino blood nowadays? Because if you think about it, we're all, some sort of, our ancestors, some are Chinese, some are Spanish. What is Filipino blood? Do you need to have brown skin? What kind of values do you need to have? Makikisama, utang na loob, resiliency. But are these actually all exclusively Filipino traits? And what religion do you guys need to have? Do you have to be Catholic? Do you have to be Christian? Let me give you some examples. For example, the Azgals. Azgals are the national football team in the Philippines. Most of these players are actually halfies who are born and raised in Europe. Are they Filipino? What about Gilas? A Philippine national basketball team. We have someone who's actually naturalized. Yes, legally speaking, he is Filipino, but is he socially or culturally accepted as a Filipino? And what about our beauty queens? We have a Raj, we have a Wurzbach, we have a Gray. These are all not traditional Filipino last names, and some may even argue that they don't even look Filipino. But to you guys, are they Filipino? Let me give you a more complicated example. There's this guy who I met, actually, who's a Filipino passport holder. He is full Filipino by blood, whose first language is actually Japanese. He does not speak a single word of Filipino, as he lived in Japan his whole life. He does not eat Filipino food. He does not do anything traditionally Filipino. But is he considered a Filipino? Another example is, what about this friend that I met, whose parents are from France, but he was born in France, raised in the Philippines, speaks Tagalog than me, at least better than me, and he eats balut, he knows how to makikisama, he is Catholic, and claims that he's more Filipino and feels more Filipino than he actually is French. But just because he's white, does that mean he's not Filipino anymore? And what about this? The famous singer Haley Steinfeld, who is 1/8 Filipino by blood. 1/8. That means her grandfather's father is Filipino. Do you think she still has Filipino culture in her or in her family? Is she still a Filipino? The question is, where do you really draw the line for this? I'm not saying they're not Filipino. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just giving a perspective. I just want you guys to think about it. Where do you draw the line? Most of us who have unusual backgrounds have often been met with mixed reactions. Some of us are embraced as part of the rich cultures of the Philippines. Others, though, have met with skepticism and sometimes even rejection. A couple of years ago, a news anchor actually from a very, very top news channel in the Philippines said this about the Philippine Azgals. They are not real Filipinos. They are just pretending to be brown skin. Of course, he said this in Filipino, but I just translated it. So there's just some people like this who has this very rigid idea of what Filipinos should be like because they're used to it. But the thing is, we're always evolving and we're always changing. The Philippine culture is always changing. And one more thing that really bothers me personally is that, and again, you guys don't actually have to agree with me, but many Filipinos have this idea that Filipinos have to be Filipinos only by blood. Many of us Chinese people, and I'm sure here in St. Jude, is that we lived in the Philippines for so many, 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 many years. Some of us honestly speak Filipino more than Chinese, Mandarin, Hokkien, or Cantonese. And yet, people don't really accept them fully as Filipino. For me, for example, on social media, when I was in PBB, when I was doing For Hanoi, or when I was doing all these different TV stuff, I often get hate messages saying, Richard, why are you here in the Philippines? Go back to Hong Kong, go back to China. You're not Filipino. When I got into PBB, I remember my dad was telling me there were some tweets saying, Richard, why is Richard in PBB? He's not Filipino. Why is he taking him a spot in Pinoy Big Brother? The title says Pinoy Big Brother. Why is he there? But the thing is, there are a lot of my friends out there who are also Chinese, but they're always never accepted. They have lived here all their life. They feel Filipino. They do so many Filipino stuff. And yet, they also receive unnecessary hate on the streets, for example. Like, I had this friend who made me cuento saying like, when he was on the streets, they were saying, Oy, balik ka na sa China, hindi ka welcome dito, balik ka na. Because of course, with the whole conflict, I don't want to get into the whole politics side of this, but it's just sad. I mean, we're so many Chinese people here, or not even just Chinese, or maybe even what they called foreigners or afams are treated that way. They've lived here all their life, but yet they're excluded by being called Filipino. Okay, but yet sometimes Filipinos who live abroad, who grew up abroad, who spent their whole life in the US, for example, they identify themselves as American, English, British, but yet they have one little bit of Filipino blood. And all us Filipinos go celebrate their Filipinoism, Filipinoness. They're seen as like Filipinos right away, but yet they don't even identify themselves as Filipino anymore. They grow up in America, they like the hamburgers, they like the crazy parties and all those crazy stuff, and yet they're just because they're Filipino, but they're Filipino right away. I'm not, again, I just want to say, I'm not saying they're not Filipino, but I just want to say that non-Filipinos should be accepted. Let me rephrase this again. I'm not saying that they are not Filipino, but I just want to say that the non-Filipino blooded Filipinos should be accepted as Filipinos too. When you say Filipino French, when you say Filipino German, Filipino Chinese, there's always this connotation right away that you're a mixed race. You're half Chinese, half Filipino, half Chinese, half Filipino, half German. And if you say American Chinese though, or you say American Polish, American Italian, you don't automatically associate them as a mixed race. But for me, I guess at the end of the day, I just wish that Filipinos in general can be more open about this idea of having a Filipino who does not have a Filipino blood. You guys following? Yes? Yes? Okay, I hope so. We have to accept that the world is getting smaller with technology. Different cultures are getting mixed around all over the world, including the Philippines. With the increasing amount of Filipinos working abroad, and of course the ever-increasing number of foreigners who are actually moving into the Philippines and living in the Philippines, the trend will continue. Did you guys know that in 2010, an estimated 11% of the Filipino population, that's 12.5 million Filipinos, are actually based abroad? I can imagine how the numbers actually just grew for the past 9 years. Filipinos can be found pretty much everywhere in this world. Next door in Hong Kong, maybe in Shanghai, in London, in Qatar, everywhere. Filipinos are just everywhere. And all these people are actually part of making this Filipino culture. Quoting Erin Sinogba, who wrote the article, Pinoy Diversity in a Hyper-Connected World for Rappler, excluding them from any definition of Filipino leaves behind an incomplete picture of people's history. For me, Filipinoism or Filipino culture isn't getting lost. It's simply evolving, simply growing. And this applies to all the cultures in the world. Being a Filipino is more than a matter of a mindset. It's an idea, it's a feeling, and it's your action and how you feel that makes you a Filipino. Thank you guys very much, and I hope you guys learned a thing or two.